Good evening.
Good evening.
You guys tired? Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. How's everyone doing?
Tired.
Welcome and thank you for coming to our first of 4 workshops on professional development that the Black Law Student Association here at Suffolk Law will be putting on throughout the 2015-2016 academic school year. My name is Sharina Clark, and I am the president of BLSA here at Suffolk Law, and I welcome you all this evening to this event. We have a great program, great speakers, both who I know personally and appreciate in different ways. So please take this time to really build your brand. Personal, professional, whatever branding means to you, this is a time to learn that word in a professional setting. So welcome, please eat, drink soda and water. This is not an open bar event because it's professional, right? But welcome, and you guys can read my welcome letter. It was really nice, but I don't want to read it out loud, so welcome. Now I'm going to tell you guys about our speakers. Quaim Lee, who works in the Professional Career Development Office here at Suffolk Law. He is in his 2nd year here at Suffolk, has been doing this for a little while, has done it here as well as at Northeastern Law, which he is an alum from. Look, Quaim's nodding. I'm doing this from my head. That's amazing. And he is a support system for all of us here at Suffolk, whether you need career advice, professional advice, personal advice. Quaim has truly been someone that has been Team BLSA and Team Suffolk students. So please remember him if you need anything while in the building. So thank you, Quaim, for being a presenter today. Our guest speaker, Monica Cost, is a Hampton alum. Everyone that knows that I'm an HBCU fan. She is a Hampton alum and is a fabulous person. If you read her biography in the program, she is an expert in this area. She truly believes in finding yourself through branding and speaks on it nationally. And so I really hope that you guys take this time to appreciate her, because we do, and that's why we got her to speak. So thank you for coming, and let's get the show started.
Thank you.
Quaim, ready?
Thank you, Sharina. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you all for coming out this evening. Thank you, Ms. Cost, for joining us. Welcome to the Suffolk community. And it's really a privilege for me to have the opportunity to share a few thoughts from the perspective of one who counsels law students, lawyers, recovering lawyers, what have you, in thinking about the next step in their journey. And I titled tonight, my portion of tonight's presentation, Developing a Professional Identity in a Crowded Marketplace, because the legal profession is going through quite a bit of transition. After 2008, there were changes in terms of firms restructuring, firms closing, changes in how government funds legal services, the number of opportunities that are available to attorneys, and since 2008, what the marketplace has demanded is really the marketplace has demanded that law students as well as lawyers assume a much more entrepreneurial perspective in their careers, in the sense of taking ownership of who you are as a professional and seeking out the tools to really advance yourself going forward. So what I endeavor to do tonight is, hopefully in a very brief manner, because I know there are greater things in store for Ms. Cost coming later, to just go over a few things that I hope will be helpful to you as you're thinking through your career here at Suffolk and beyond. And as I'm speaking, feel free to ask questions if you have any concerns. And if you ever need to find me, I am down in the PCD office in room 120 on the first floor. So without further ado, let us start. So tonight we're going to cover 3 topics. The wonderful folks in BLSA prepared a program, but because I am one who sometimes likes a little spontaneity, I changed my titles somewhat, but the content will be still essentially the same. So we're going to cover competence and skill in professional identity, developing your identity, and leaving lasting impressions. So without further ado, understanding competence and skill versus professional identity. I see these two as in partnership with one another because although they inform each other, they don't mean the same thing. Competence and skill, this covers what are my capabilities? What am I good at? Can I do this job? Many employers today, when they evaluate you, use competency-based evaluation methods to determine how you are advancing in your professional development. So they'll look at key indicators of what you're capable of doing as indicative of your ability to advance, and they will assess you, challenge you over the course of your career with that employer. The government has been doing this for many years. Private sector non-legal employers have been doing this for some time, and it's becoming an increasing part of what firms do as well. Professional identity is different in some ways because it really talks to what is my brand, what is my reputation, how do people perceive me? A few years ago, in 2007, there was a famous study that came out that really sort of shook the foundations of law schools called the Carnegie Report, which looked at how law schools are educating their would-be attorneys. And one of the things they really focused on was the notion of professional formation, understanding that when you are part of a profession, which is a select community of people who have a certain level of skill and ability that is privileged within a society, there are certain values that you need to inculcate into who you are. And while competencies and skills speak to your ability to write, to research, to hold a conversation, professional identity is the other side of it, which is how people perceive you and how they hold you out. How does the world see you based on how well you perform at certain tasks? So I'm going to go through very quickly some competencies and how they look in terms of someone understanding you in terms of your professional identity. So one competency is written and oral advocacy. If you've met with one of my colleagues or myself, we spend a lot of time dealing with helping you to write in your resume how well you wrote the memo last summer or when you were able to do oral arguments in your clinic here. So oral advocacy, written advocacy is something that you'll be evaluated on in the marketplace. But this is how an employer might respond to your work as well as a client. So-and-so's points were always clear and succinct. Now it shows that piece there. What I'm doing is I'm pulling out little quotations to show you how other people might respond to your ability to succeed in this competency. The second one is where you're not successful. I don't see where you're going with this. Now, when an employer or a client or a professor assesses your work with the second one, it shows that you are not competent in this area. When you're successful in the first point, then your reputation can now begin to grow and spread that you're able to succeed at doing this kind of work. And the next few ones I show will mimic that dichotomy. Analytical skills. I didn't think of that before. Anyone ever said that to you while you were in internships? That's something that's a badge of honor because you've come up with a different way of looking at things. But the converse of that is, I really didn't get your reasoning there. detail orientation. No typos in my resume versus no typos in my resume. Anyone catch the glitch? This is a big deal. A lot of times I sit with students, and folks who've worked with me know that I'm pretty meticulous about this. When you have these little typos, it shows that you don't show this level of conscientiousness about your own work. And if you're not going to get your own work right, you're not going to get my work right, and I lose clients. So it's imperative that one be strong in these areas. Networking and business development is a big one. The N word is something that students often get a little anxious about when we use it in career development. It's a different N word than some people might have otherwise be thinking. Because when folks hear the awful word of networking, they think of big crowded rooms with lots of alcohol, socially awkward people, and not a whole lot of bonding. When what you should really think of it as is part of you really putting yourself out there as a member of the legal community, whether you're in Boston, in New York, California, wherever. Now, after you've met with someone, you might send them an email saying, it was a pleasure meeting you at the section meeting yesterday. This might have been the section meeting for the criminal section in the Boston Bar Association. Would you be available for lunch Friday to talk further? So here's a chance where you're reaching out to someone, following up, which is what we always tell you to do, so that you can continue to develop that relationship. And that person then sees that you were taking an interest in what we did last night and cultivating it and carrying it further. Really honing this skill, not only will it help you advance in terms of developing clients, et cetera, but also developing a reputation for being a conscientious, engaged person, as opposed to, oh, sorry, I forgot to get back to you. Someone seeing this, you might think it's pretty harmless, but suddenly that person thinks, well, this person isn't very serious. They didn't take very seriously our conversation last night, even though they promised to get back. And now suddenly your word, which should be your bond, has lost its footing. Teamwork. So-and-so always carries his or her own weight versus, where were you when we needed you? Teamwork is becoming an increasingly valuable skill, competency to have in the workplace, where many times when you're working on deals, when you're preparing for trial, you're going to work with other folks. Some people are going to be more reliable than others. You should be the one that they can rely on. You want to be the person who gets that where that first quotation is used as opposed to the second one. Professionalism. Now, email is probably the most vivid one because that's one of the central media of communication that we use today. What you should use in an email is Dear Ms. Sarbanes. What we see far too often of from students, and these are responses that we've gotten back from employers, is that sometimes people are just way too casual. Using smiley faces is a no-no in the professional world, particularly in this profession. Don't assume that you can use things like hi Jane or 3 exclamation marks. Now that might seem very trivial, but what that does is it gives that person that sense that you don't take their role seriously, you don't take them seriously, so they won't take you seriously. Diligence. Your work is always on time and on point. That's something you want your employers to be able to say about you, that when you're turning in assignments, they really align with what you're supposed to do. My first internships when I was in law school, I was supposed to write a motion to dismiss when I was working for a state agency. I spent 2 weeks working on this motion to dismiss. This thing was 15 pages long. My employer came back the second to last day of work and said, Quaid, this was so wonderfully written. If we were going to be submitting this to the appeals court, this would be great. No, this is the trial court. This needs to be 5 pages. You were too long. You never bothered to check in with me on my assignment. That was pretty embarrassing. Wasted his time, wasted my time, and I missed the deadline. He could have gotten that sooner than when I had turned it in. And you can waste a lot of time trying to rebuild now your impression with this person by just not making sure that you're diligent in terms of your follow-through and your follow-up. So what I did was just give you a few examples of of some of the things that you should think about as you're going into the workplace. You'll find on a number of legal websites listings of core competencies that employers look for as they're hiring people. These are the sorts of things that you should begin to inculcate into yourself as you're starting to think about practice of law in the marketplace. It's more than just grades, it's how people also perceive you. Now, in terms of developing your identity, there are a few points I wanted to bring out tonight. As part of developing your identity, knowing and honoring your ethical obligations. As a member of the bar, which is both regulated by the state in terms of your state Supreme Court, as well as self-regulated in the sense of your responsibility to other members of the bar, there's certain ethical implications to virtually everything you do. And even starting here in law school, many of you remember during orientation a really elaborate presentation that the administrators gave about your duty to disclose certain things to the law school. So you have obligations to the law school faculty members, administrators, and staff. Certainly to the courts and the bar. Peers, your classmates are going to become someday your fellow practitioners. You may end up working for your classmates, no less. The 2L, if you're a 3L, the 2L that you shut the elevator door on when you were coming up the stairs may end up becoming your boss someday. At one point when I was working at Northeastern, my boss was 2 years behind me in law school. I did not know her when she was in law school. One of the members of the Board of Trustees here for this university, we were in Sunday school together. And he was 2 years older than me. And it's a very small universe. So be mindful of your relationships, knowing and honoring your ethical obligations, both in terms of professional ethics as well as your personal ethical values, which I really believe should transcend your professional ethics. Think about those things, sometimes those common sense principles that you grew up with, and how they align with and can hold you to a higher standard than even the Model Code of Professional Responsibility might. Any questions so far? Thank you. Managing expectations, learning who stakeholders are. Part of developing your identity is understanding who are the people that you're going to be responsible to, getting acquainted with what the power dynamics of an organization are, and setting deadlines that you're going to be confident in exceeding. A boss always likes when you turn it in sooner than you promised. What is not good is when you turn it in afterwards, because it undermines their ability to trust you in the future with assignments that would come along later on. Keeping the lines active, live and active. Learn early who needs to be in the loop. Keep all who are in your loop informed, especially when there are exigencies or unexpected delays. If you don't know, always make sure to ask. Sometimes I think students, when you're on internships, when you're a first person to start, when you're a novice in a particular function at work, there's a reluctance to ask what seems like the silly question, but better to lay it all on the table now than later on, because it's part of you demonstrating diligence. It's part of you being proactive. And by the way, it's also an ethical obligation that we'll have as attorneys. And own your mistakes early. Present solutions readily. In the sense of, if everyone's going to make mistakes at some point, that's how we learn, that's how we grow. Better to own them and not defer blame onto someone else, and identify how the situation can be rectified. When I talk to my friends who are members of the bar today, who are practicing out in the field, they make mistakes all the time, but you go to your supervisor and say, look, this is what happened, or the client something was late. I wasn't able to turn this in, but this is what I'm going to do to rectify the situation. Some folks, I remember I had a manager one time who said to me, there are no excuses in life. If you show up late to work, sure, the train might have been delayed, fine, but I need you to be here to get the job done. Because by you not being here, it hinders other people from being able to advance. So it's being aware of the other folks who might be affected by what you do and what you are able to do, what you aren't able to succeed at doing, and really keeping everyone in the loop so that people can make contingencies. And you can develop a reputation as someone who, sure, they might have fallen short, but they really took the ball in hand and ran with it, owned it, and recovered, and that's what people will remember you by. Lastly, leaving lasting impressions. So in addition to, now that you're shaping your identity, you also want to be aware of what impressions you're leaving behind and for the people that you interact with, the people that you'll meet later on. Managing your internet and social media presence. This is huge. You want to maintain consistent, accurate profiles across social media platforms. So if someone goes in and Googles you and then finds your record in Twitter and finds your record in Facebook and finds you in LinkedIn, there should be some sort of common theme going on there. Develop and update your LinkedIn profile. How many folks are on LinkedIn here? How many folks have updated, how many folks here are 1Ls? How many of you have updated your LinkedIn profile since you started here at Suffolk? Very good. For the ones of you who are upper level students who've done internships, who've been working, how many of you have been updating your LinkedIn profiles regularly? One of the things employers will look at is your LinkedIn profile to see, so when you present your resume to them, are they going to find consistent information when they go and research you? So you want to be aware of that. Google yourself regularly and be able to explain what's out there. I have a very unusual name. If you typed in my name, I can almost guarantee you everything that you see on Google, or at least most of the first probably 3 pages that are out there, it's all me. Good or bad, it's all me. And I have to be accountable for that. So that if I'm interviewing for a job or I'm meeting or even in my current job where I'm meeting with a potential employer and they go and look up what I've done in the past, I have to be able to give an account for what's out there. And you should try to do the same with yourself so that you know if there was anything that you might have done in the past that's compromising, be ready to explain it because you might just have to. Think about making sure to join groups, comment on blogs and other postings, follow important players in the practice. This is starting to engage yourself in the legal community. Those of you who are on LinkedIn, I encourage you, join LinkedIn groups for areas of law that you're interested in, or in areas of business, in areas of public service. And when you see postings up there, if you know the answer to a question that someone posts, feel free to engage. There have been people who've actually gotten jobs this way. Because what you're starting to do now is shape yourself as potentially an expert in a certain area, so that as people begin to research you, they can find, well, guess what? Quaim knows a little bit about so-and-so, and it's actually true because I see that he's engaged in these things. You want to sanitize your profiles of pictures, tweets, videos, and status updates that may reflect poorly on your character and judgment. What might have seemed like a lot of fun in college can actually hinder you from being employed going forward. Familiarize yourself and use your social media portal privacy settings. If there are things that you are particularly concerned about, you want to make sure that you use the privacy settings that are available to you to keep that to the audience that should go forward to. For example, if you belong to certain discussion groups where you talk about particularly controversial topics, and you're looking to apply to a place that is not that great about people who get into controversial issues, then you want to be mindful of that because that's something that could come up. And be mindful as well of whom you friend. Now, A lot of us probably have hundreds of friends, but you also have to realize that you will be judged by the company that you keep. I sound like my mother saying that, but it's true. Just before I left my previous employer, there was a former student who wanted to friend me or join my LinkedIn. I forget which social media platform it was. And the picture that he had was this horrible cartoon of a particular university president that was not flattering. Now, it had nothing to do with me, but when the HR people would do a search on me and they find this and see, oh, this is who Quames tends to associate with, what does that say about me? So those are things that you have to be mindful of. It's not to say that you dismiss your friends, but it might require having a conversation. If you know that there are people who others might not think well on, that you might have to give an account for. For those of you who are interested in careers in the law enforcement industry, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the District Attorney's Office, when they do background checks, these are things that you may have to answer for as they're looking at what kind of reputation this person might have. Maintaining relationships with the bar, investing in your professional development. You want to connect with the area bar associations. One of the benefits of going to this law school is we have the best location of any law school in the city of Boston, and they are not just paying me to say that. We literally do. All 4 of the subway lines are within a quarter mile of this building. South Station is a 10-minute walk and can take you all the way to DC, and if you connect to New York, the country is your oyster. The airport is relatively accessible. We have Beacon Hill, where the state legislature and the governor's office is just at our backs. City Hall is down the street. The financial services industry is all around us. The courts are all around us. This is the best law school to be in the city. And the 2 chief bar associations in the city of Boston, the Boston Bar Association and the Mass Bar Association, are literally a 5-minute walk of this law school. So, and one benefit that you get of going to Suffolk is you get free membership to each of these bars. So if you haven't signed up before, I encourage you to do so. If you haven't taken time to visit them, I encourage you to do so. Because here's the thing, a lot of law students just don't go. And when you show up, you stand out. Obviously, when you go, you want to leave a great impression with them. But in addition to that, make sure that you go. I know everyone's busy. We've got first years here who are just trying to get their sea legs straight. We've got 3Ls who are looking for employment. We've got 2Ls who are suddenly enjoying the fact that I don't have class tomorrow on Fridays. Use those opportunities to connect with people within the profession. And this school, probably more so than almost any other school in the city, gives you that opportunity to do that. We have conferences here that are totally free and open to the community. You want to take advantage of those. So how many folks are thinking about practicing law in a jurisdiction outside of Massachusetts? Great. How many of you have connected with the Bar Association for the jurisdiction that you want to connect with? Great. The rest of you want to start doing that. You can't wait till 3L year for this to start taking place. The thing with finding a job in this job market, one of my colleagues said it's like sowing seeds. And as many seeds as you can sow in as many places, it's more likely that you're going to see something sprout, and hopefully you'll start to bear fruit. But if you start sowing too late, it only delays when those opportunities can come forward. So you want to start getting your name out there, meeting people, letting them see who you are. Even if you don't know exactly what you want to do, if you can have a couple ideas of what you're interested in practicing and start to talk to people who do what you want to do, it'll only make you that much stronger. Using LinkedIn to build out your network and leveraging the relationships of your contacts. Once you join LinkedIn, once you've added someone to your contact list, their entire network now becomes your network. And suddenly there are people that you've not known before who suddenly are reaching, you can connect with you through the conduit of this person. I had this guy randomly contact me, I think last September, looking for a job in Cleveland. I'm like, I don't know anybody in Cleveland other than LeBron James, and I don't know him personally. And I'm like, why is this guy contacting me in Cleveland? Turns out he wanted to work for my former regional director who used to be in Boston, who's now in the Cleveland office, and he just wanted to network with me. How did this guy find me? We were second-level contacts in LinkedIn. And I was able to give him some tips in terms of preparing for his interview, what to expect. If it weren't for LinkedIn, he probably would never have met me or connected with me in that way. So it's a great resource for building out relationships. Plus, as people are looking at your LinkedIn profile, as they're considering you for employment, they're also looking to see who you're also connected with. If you've been able to build relationships with people they know, then suddenly now they can start to reach out to this person and say, what do you know about Quaim? Is he really who he says he is? Is he reliable? Is his work straight? Is he diligent? All of those things that I raised earlier. And certainly joining groups specific to your practice areas. Don't forget your undergraduate institutions. Those of you who are members of HBCs here, you have very well-developed alumni associations. Some of you might have gone to particularly prestigious high schools that have really sophisticated and well-developed alumni associations. Take advantage of that. And obviously your law school as well. Suffolk has 23,000 alums. That's the law school, 23,000 alums. Those are 23,000 opportunities you have to secure a job. And lastly, leaving a positive legacy, making sure not to burn bridges. One of the complaints we get sometimes from interviewers is when someone fails to call them back. For example, you got an interview to work with a government agency you really didn't want to work with in the first place. So you got a better job and say, I'm not going to call this guy back. What do I care? Guess what? They remember you. And the thing about memory is bad memories have a much more indelible mark than good ones. And this is a very small legal community, extremely small. And you never know who you could run into on any given day. I happened to be over at the Edward Brook Courthouse helping out a family member with an issue. I must have run into 6 Suffolk people. And I'm thinking, suppose I was caught up in some bad stuff and they came back to work and what? Oh my, that Quaim guy, Dean Slater, I'm gonna have to watch out about him. And it's just down the street. Just minding my own business. We're standing there in line and suddenly comes along an internship employer. She says, what are you doing here? I ran into a clinical professor over there who was researching a case. Very small universe. Past employers, past interviewers, these are people you want to end things well. Even if you're turning someone down, let them know that they can see that when you've turned them down, that it was done well. It was done in a way that they can come away and feel respect and feel that this was someone who treated me well, because they will remember you. Past employers and faculty, certainly administrators, people you see in the elevator, you never know who you may encounter. Don't always assume because of how people are dressed that they are one thing or another, because that person may be connected to who knows who could control your destiny. And certainly your classmates, the people around you, the folks in this room tonight. How many of the folks that you sat next to did you bother to turn around and say hello to, other than your friends? Hello. It seems trivial, but it's, again, you're starting to inculcate certain behaviors that will carry on as you go forth in the future. Because the person sitting behind you could very well be your supervisor, or could very well be the cousin of your supervisor, could very well be the son or daughter of your supervisor, could be the uncle of your professor. And so and we don't just do this for the sake of, because of what's in it for me, but because it's the right thing to do. So with that, I just wanted to take a moment to just say thank you for taking the time to be here tonight and for listening to our presentation. If you have any questions, I don't want to hold you up any longer, but feel free to email me. You can call my office. You can set up an appointment. I'll be here at the end of tonight's presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Oh. Thank you. That's all right. Can you all hear me through this mic as well? Yes. Okay, all right. Thank you. Good evening. When he said, "How are you?" earlier, someone said, "Tired." So let's do a little something to wake up. Why don't we stand up and along the vein that Quayne brought up, if you could just introduce yourself to someone that you don't know and tell them why you came here tonight, what you wanted to get out of it. All right, can I have you back? Thank you for indulging me, and I want to hear about those in a second. One of the things that I always forget to do is to talk about the social media piece. So if you like it, post it. Completely okay with that. I'm pretty easy to find. If you just type in Facebook, Monica Cost, whatever, all of that will come up. So I want to hear what some of the objectives were that you heard when you introduced yourself to someone. Anybody willing to volunteer? What someone put? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shabria Ponder. I know for me, one thing when I was introducing myself was that I wanted to just find different ways to brand myself. I know when I was an undergrad, that's one thing, being part of an organization, that's one thing that we reached out to the freshmen and sophomores, like building your brand and how it can help people later on in life.
Thank you. Who else, please? Good at waiting. Thank you.
My name is Terrence. I'm a 1L. I'm at Oksana, and we both came for the same reason. Just trying to kind of differentiate the difference between branding and networking.
Thank you. Hopefully, if I don't answer that, please bring it back up at the end. One more, please. Put us out of our misery. One more. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
My name is Prince Sepabawachi, and unfortunately I didn't have time to meet with somebody new for the first time, but my objective here is to understand branding. I also have a brand I want to learn more how I can expand, so I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Excellent, thank you so much. Now we can move on. So I will tell you, they were like, oh my God, she's serious, like she's not gonna say another word. So I'll tell you a little bit about my objectives. The first is to have some fun. You know, I'm sure you go to lots of classes and workshops and you're, trying to prevent the head from hitting the desk or getting whiplash. So tonight I hope we have a few laughs in addition to learning some things that will help you. Number 2, learn a few things. Number 3, that you'll be able to apply these learnings to real life. I try to avoid, or I don't want you to have what I like to call a church moment. And that's a moment where you go in, forgive me for those who don't go to church, but growing up, when you hear something good and the pastor said, you go, ooh, amen, I'm going to apply that today, as soon as I get out of church. Hallelujah, right? And then what happens is you get out of church and something sucks you right back in and you're like, what was that message again? And then by Tuesday, you forgot that you even went to church. So I hope that this evening that some of the concepts and some of the language and terminology that I offer will allow you to be able to apply it, and that when situations come up, that these concepts will resonate in your mind automatically. That is my hope. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, actually. I don't know how many of you read the bio, but anyway, I'm originally from Philadelphia. I grew up in a single parent but not broken home with my mother and my sister, and I went to Hampton University, as Sharina mentioned. I am a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and I was a good girl. I was a rule follower. I was the person that everybody expected to do the right thing, and anytime I got out of order, instead of punishing me, the adults would go, now Monica, you know better, and I would line right back up. So that was kind of how I lived my life, is living into the expectations of other people. Somewhere around 8th grade, and it took a while for me to become really good at math. And so because I was a woman of color, everybody said, yes, you must go into finance. That position is noble, it's gonna take you places, there's very few women doing it, and you're good at math. Finance sounded like a good enough position or good enough career to me, so I majored in finance and accounting. I graduated, I ended up working as an auditor for Prudential Insurance, and they had healthcare way back when. So I was an analyst, and I played all these different roles in finance. And along the way, or in that job, I started to become the person who had the rotating chair in her office. So people would always come in, plop down, and have diarrhea of the soul. And it would range from anything around relationships to I don't think I'm going to get the promotion, to they have me on the road too much, to can you believe that meeting went 3 hours? And it was always soliciting some sort of advice. So I didn't pay much attention to it, but after a while I was just like, okay, I can't really do my work with this rotating chair, so let me just start giving some really blunt feedback, and that'll get rid of them. So I did that, but guess what happened? The opposite. Although it was tough to hear, what people came back and said was that it was tough to hear and I was mad at you for a few days, but I made some changes or I noticed what you said was true. So I ended up meeting a boy, and then I moved here to Massachusetts and we got married, and I started working for the TJX companies, and the same thing happened. Although I was now in a cubicle, they had a different structure, I had this rotating chair at the end. So finally, one of my good friends said, when are you going to start charging people for this advice you're giving? And I was just like, who charges for advice? And she's like, everybody, check it out. So I did a little bit of research, excuse me, and sure enough, people charge for advice when it's good. So my company started out solely as a personal brand company. And what I was doing was helping professionals understand how they show up, not just in the workplace, but in the world. And how can you build that existence or that presence in a way that makes you more marketable? So tonight we're talking about I've coined myself as a pathfinder. And the reason is because over time, what I found out about myself, what I'm really good at, from what I'm told, is that I'm a really good listener. I'm really good at slicing the pie in every way imaginable, in ways that people hadn't thought of. And what that allows people to do is to see their journey from different angles, to say, you know what, I'm gonna take this way, then I'm gonna take a right and then a left, versus getting lost. So that's particularly what, specifically what I do, is I help people find their way. I help people find their way. So tonight, or this evening, we're gonna talk about helping you find your journey to the most positive, authentic, and effective brand for you. So before we get into content, I'd like you to look at the picture and just give me some terminology around her brand as you perceive her. How would you describe Oprah's brand? Media mogul. Powerful. Multiple streams of income. Wealthy. Inspirational. Well, I heard one more. Ambitious. And tell me a little bit about what about her would make you think she's ambitious.
It was more of like, I read her story on how she was, I guess, laid off from a particular job based on, they stated that she wasn't, I guess, for television, she wasn't fit for television. So just to be able to overcome that, like, she didn't stop there, she overcame that.
Absolutely. We're going to circle back to that. All right, next person. Adjectives, terminology on his brand. Innovative. Brilliant. What is it? Go-getter. So based upon, now do any of you know Mark Zuckerberg or Oprah Winfrey personally? Okay, so you're perceiving this based upon what you've read, interviews you've seen, am I right? Okay. Awesome, okay. Strong. Smart. Trendsetter. And you know what's interesting to me? This is the third picture, and I don't know if I've heard the same adjective yet. Do you notice that? Okay, these are brands we're talking about. Keep it clean, keep it clean. Keep it clean.
Active.
All right, here we go. Yes?
Active.
Active.
I think she's beautiful.
Hustler, beautiful. Selfie. That's what comes to mind.
I think she definitely, I would honestly say that she's smart, because she
Okay.
works, she doesn't work hard, she works smart. I think that's the way I can put it. It's not that I admire her, but she got somewhere with something.
Yeah, and you know what? You don't owe us any explanation for your, for your label or the way you're branding her. I think I have one more. Be nice.
Entrepreneur.
I heard two, entrepreneur, optimistic, businessman.
Yeah.
All right. So, as you can see, a personal brand is the promise that you make to the world through the display of your values about what you stand for. So what we believe about the photos and the people that we've seen is that they're showing us what they stand for. Would you agree? Yeah. Okay, so they're selling us something, right? They're selling us a brand. The question is, what kind of brand are you building? When I first started doing this work, and I don't know if this still happens, but when I first started in the job market, we used to call people to say, like, what are the if you wanted to work in insurance, you would say, like, what are the buzzwords in insurance? Or like, if you worked at a company and I wanted to work there, I might call you and say, I really want to work at Gillette. What are the people at Gillette? What's important to the people at Gillette? And then I would go back and I would kind of make my resume match what Gillette wanted. Does that still happen? Yeah. Okay. So that's a market-led brand, because the market suggests this is what we need for you to be. And then you say, yeah, I think I could be that. All right, well, let me just tweak this to make this sound like that. Those are the kinds of brands that I was building in the beginning, to say the marketplace is looking for people who can do more than one thing. The marketplace is looking for people who are detail oriented. The marketplace is looking for this, 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 and this. People who are more conservative in their dress. People who are appropriate. So there were all these ways, and people were conforming. So they were like, okay, this is what I need to be. The problem with a market-led brand is that it falls apart. Because what happens is, and I know I've experienced this personally, where I'm a great interviewer. I can kill it in the interview. But what happens when you sell something and it's not completely who you are, but you're selling it to get the job, 6 to 8 months later, when you're still called upon to be that person and you're not able to be that, that's kind of how good employees move to bad employees, right? They're not really bad employees. It's just that they're not leading with their values, and we're going to talk about what that means. And because they're not leading with their values, they're not able to continue to be authentic. Because values, much like oil and water, will eventually separate and pull themselves apart. So the market-led brand would ask, what does the market want and how do I become or display it? For example, a junior partner who might adjust their values depending on the circumstances, either for acceptance, for acknowledgement, for promotion, right? A value-led brand says, how do my core values align with this environment, circumstance, or task? Now that's much tougher, particularly in a bad job market, if you happen to be in one, or if you feel like, you've been on 20 interviews, you really just need this job. What do you need me to be? I'll be it, right? But that's short-term thinking. What you want to do is figure out what your core values are, and then how do I find an environment that aligns with my core values? That example might be a vice president who sacrifices a loose deadline in order to assist an employee in development. So let's say this particular manager really believes in development. That's just one of their core values. It's who they are. Well, they could just say, forget this opportunity to develop the employee. All I care about is the deadline. Well, that's abandoning the value to meet a particular circumstances instead of sticking to their values. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about this. So what drives us in terms of how we build our brand? A little while ago, you guys gave lots of different labels and adjectives to describe the people that were on the screen. Well, in this country, labels are important. Would you agree? Now, the thing about labels is currently we've become a society of label chasers. Everybody wants to be pretty and popular and smart and in the know and a trendsetter and a go-getter, right? That's why the Facebook pages and posts look like they do, right? Because people are looking for labels. They're craving labels. The problem with labels is, one, it gets noisy. Because how do you know which label you need to be in which environment, right? Chasing the labels becomes almost like a full-time job. And why do we chase the labels? For something that people actually don't like to talk about. And it's what I call the sensation destination. So most of the time in workplaces, we don't like to talk about emotions, and women usually get attributed with this whole emotional thing, but men get emotional. I've seen it. When I was a commercial real estate broker, let a $12 million deal fall apart at noon. See what happens at 2 o'clock, right? They are in there swiping desks and yelling, and is that not emotional, ladies? Okay, that's emotional. But people don't like to talk about it. And so the reason why we chase labels is because we all have these sensations that we're after. And it's not something that we think about often. We're never taught to think about it. There's no formal way to understand how you like to feel or how you like to feel. But we know when we don't feel that way. For instance, one of the ways I love to feel is considered, right? It's not that I don't want to be respected, but I'm not one of those people that say, "He disrespected me." It's just not my thing. That's not my sensation. My sensation is consideration. So I don't like when people blast music in my neighborhood or so that I can hear, because it's inconsiderate, right? Before I started doing this work, I was the person who, if I held the door for you at the mall and you didn't say thank you, I would turn around and say, oh, you're welcome, right? That was me. And so then if there was a second door, I would just walk through it really quickly, right? Truth. So then I had an epiphany. And it was about this thing around values and not abandoning them. So what I now know is when I don't feel considered, I recognize it, right? So when I can feel it when I feel something or somebody's vexing me, I can take a look and say, what about, now consideration is just one of the sensations. We all have kind of like a top 2 or 3. So I can take a look and say, are they kind of bumping against, are they making me feel unconsidered? Which I did not know was a word, which sounds crazy. You guys know lots of words, but that was one that I didn't know. And so pay attention to the sensations. When something's upsetting you or a person has pushed a button, it's either going to be the sensation that they are coming up against, or I forgot to turn off the Wi-Fi, so it keeps asking me if you want to sign on to Xfinity. All right, so a value. So now we're going to get into values. It's something that is highly regarded. A value is something that you esteem highly. The way I'm talking about values this evening is I'm talking about your value approach. It is the way you operate. The other term I like to use for this is your personal protocol. It is how you do things when something happens. So we're going to have a mini little gripe session, because I'm sure from classes and financial aid and whatever else you have going on, you could use it. So I'd like you to think for a moment, and I'm very bad at following the PowerPoint and the paper, so I won't get offended if you're writing down on the paper, but I'm more following the PowerPoint. But there are areas, if you want to take notes, there are areas on the paper and in the book. So take a moment to think of your top 3 pet peeves. And I don't mean the stuff that are, that are the things that are minor annoyances, but I mean things that like get a reaction out of you. I wish I had the game clock. I'll give you just a minute to think about those. Pet peeves, things that send you over the top. She has hers. Yes, no judgment. It is what it is. We have to own it. The faster we can own it, the faster we can fix it. All right, I'm going to write a few of these down. May I have some pet peeves, please? Would you like to start?
Oh, I can start. One of my pet peeves, and it's making me laugh whenever I think about it, is when people are very short with me. When I'm trying to ask a question, they just brush me off. That really is a pet peeve.
Thank you. Who else? Yes.
People who talk down to me like they're so significant and above me, that drives me insane.
Thank you. In the white jacket, yes.
In addition to what she said, not being heard,
Now, how do you know you're not being heard?
kind of like she said earlier, they're rushing you or they're talking down to you and they don't take the time to really see what you're trying to say.
Thank you. I'm going to go over here in the back, yes.
Just piggybacking off of what both of them said, people who prefer to themselves in the third person.
All the way in the back, yes.
My pet peeve is when I'm having a conversation with someone and they're telling me they're listening to me, but I'm talking and they're talking over me.
The interrupter. I'm a recovering interrupter. Mhm. Yes, sir.
Bad hygiene, like oral or body.
Yes.
Most of everything what everyone said, but also when people won't take responsibility for their stuff.
Thank you. Yes.
So literally to piggyback off of everything that everyone said, so flame shifters for one, especially in a problem-solving arena, those who instead of sticking to solving a problem, finding somebody to blame for the problem.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
People that don't keep their promise.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
For me, and another one is like someone that's like always complaining, like sending off like the bad energy, like everything is a problem. Like, it's a problem.
Thank you. I saw another hand in the middle. Yes, Queen.
Close talkers.
Close talkers. Oh my God, that was a great Seinfeld episode. Oh God, it was so funny. It just came on too. I saw. Yes, sir.
People that live in their cell phones.
Mm. Yes.
Lateness, when people are always late.
Thank you. Yes.
Good manners.
Good manners.
People who are polite.
Who aren't polite.
Simple things as please, thank you, may I. It's
And
just the
polite.
smallest things, most consistent.
Thank you. One more. Yes.
Passive aggressiveness.
Passive aggressive. All right, so I'll share 3 of mine since you all were, and thank you so very much for joining this conversation. It was a little tricky in the beginning, but pulling through. All right, so inconsideration, lack of compassion, and wasting time are 3 of my big ones. Now, what happens when you experience a pet peeve? Yes.
I just shut down the whole way.
Okay. What else?
I was gonna say the exact same thing. I just shut down.
Yes.
It's kind of similar, but I pull away opposed to just shutting down. I really pull away. You won't see me.
Thank you. Yes.
I want to know why they believe that that's appropriate behavior.
So do you actually ask the question?
I actually asked.
Yeah, okay, yes.
I just quickly try to determine whether it's worth dealing with or saying something or not.
So you want to, is this worth the emotional investment of, yes, okay, yes.
Depending on which pet peeve it is, they may get checked.
Yeah, thank you, yes,
I think less of the first.
thank you,
Yeah.
yes.
If it's like the talking down to one, like, like blue collar and he gets up and I'm all like, I wanna like show how much I know, like, to be like, don't talk down to me, so yeah, that one, otherwise I'll just, like Joe said, just like decide if it's worth it.
Got it, yes.
I try to like, look at trigger points to see when that behavior is coming on, and then try to avoid it either by, so one of mine is wasting time as well. So then certain people I won't go to meetings with, or I won't be in certain circles with where I know they have the opportunity to waste my time. And I'm like, oh, I already preempted that, I did X, Y, and Z, it's done already, just give me your thoughts and a quick email will be done.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're finding a way to meet your own value,
Yeah.
right? So on the other side of every pet peeve is a value. And the reason why this is important is because this behavior, now let's say the second door I dropped was on Queen, right? Is that how you pronounce it? Am I pronouncing it right? So let's say the second time I dropped, now I had never met him before tonight, but when I dropped the door in the mall earlier, it was on him. Now he works for this university. I would like to do more work with this university. And there is my brand left at a door, abandoning my values of consideration as a response to what I like to call the value confrontation, right? So I had a value confrontation and I responded to it in a way that took me off the path of what I would normally do. So I adjusted my value to fit the situation. Huge mistake, right? You have to, when you own your own values, one, when you identify them, there's no formal way for us, at least in these here United States, to understand what our true value approach is in life. And the reason why this is so critical to our brand is because how we get derailed is when we have value confrontations and we act out of what we would normally do. Instead of understanding that when you have a value confrontation that you are just simply dealing with another person who doesn't share your same value system. So if we can recognize it as that, well, then we can change our language, we can change our behavior, right? I also, when people are late, for me, so there's a process that you have to go through to boil down pet peeves into what the value really is. But when people are late, for me, it's an inconsiderate thing, that you're not considering me. I said I want to leave at 7:30. So I have a friend who's always late. And so I remember going to a lot of events with this friend, and I would say I'm leaving at 7:30, and she would show up around 7:50, 8 o'clock, and now I'm in a different space. I'm in a, I'm short with her, I'm, fiddling with my purse, I can't wait to get it, but even when I get there, it's taking me a minute to come off the how upset I am with the fact that she was late. So again, when I started uncovering all these nice little gems and nuggets, and I was like, why am I letting her, by pushing my button, my value button, why am I letting her take me out of my space? So sometimes you can fix it. So in this situation, I said, all right, here's the deal. I'm leaving at 7:30. I'm driving. If you would like to ride with me, be here at 7:30. And it only took one time for me to leave her. And now we're all right. Because then she'll know if she can't be there at the time we indicated, then she'll say, oh, I'll just meet you there. Great. Now I show up to the event with all of my values intact. I've not had a value confrontation. And I don't judge her for the time she's late. She doesn't value time like I do or consideration. And it is not my job or yours to convert everyone else to your value system. And I want you to think about this as you're looking for jobs. Because what happens sometimes is that you end up at a position and you actually love the job. You have the skill set. But because you end up in an environment that is constantly vexing your soul because of value confrontations, you'll say, oh, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. When really what you mean is I need to identify a culture that values the same thing I value. So you have to interview these organizations, whatever they are, whether it's work or a board you're going to sit on, to see how does it operate. The people that I have to deal with, what's their personal protocol? Does that make sense? Okay. Goodbye, Xfinity. All right. So why does this matter? How long do you think it takes the average American to form a first impression? 6, 2. So you're right, 5 to 7 seconds. It's human nature, right? Because it's that whole fight or flight thing. We need to size things up immediately in order to make decisions. The problem is, well, a couple of things is, one, in terms of us and our brand, people sum us up very quickly. But what I want you to understand from today is that should just be the first impression, not the only impression. The whole, you only get a first, a one time to make a first impression. While on the one hand it's true, I want you to be deeper than that. Because it's not just about your brand, but it's that we're aborting would-be great relationships and connections because of what we're perceiving through our own personal value filter. That's what your values are, they're filters. Because something that might make Julianne mad might not make me upset. Have you ever had somebody come to you and tell you a situation like, oh my God, can you believe this happened? And they're going on and on and on, and you're like, yeah. I don't get it. Because when you put it through your value filter, it just didn't push your buttons. Because while you may not like the situation, it's like around value 20 for you that they're hitting. So that's not even noise at that point, right? If they were somewhere around 5, you might, well, if you're a woman or a man, you might put your hands on your hips. Or you might join in with them a little bit more. But if they're hitting values that are way down on your list, you're like, you want to just be there for solidarity, but you don't get it. And so your goal is in this life of congruency, and really your brand is about congruency. So that no matter which situation you're in or which group you're in, that you have the same values. Now, how you deliver them might be different, right? How you deliver your values at home and how you deliver them at work may look different. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the language you use at home. I'm talking about how you actually think about things. If you're changing completely your opinion on two different things without any additional information, but you're revising it to fit the group, then you're not living according to your values, or you don't yet know what they are. And I'm encouraging you to do some digging to find out these values. So the effects of value confrontations are many, right? They're the things that derail us when we're talking about brand. I like to think of values as coordinates. So instead of a GPS, I have what I like to call a TPS. And it's your truth positioning system. And what it does is it allows you to understand if the sensation is considered, or if let's say it's not a sensation, if the destination is partner, right? If the destination is partner or general counsel in an organization, what you need to decide is, how am I going to get there? Now, the reason why you need to know that is because, and I know this is going to be hard for a lawyer to understand. Okay. You have to detach yourself from the outcomes. Right. So here's what I mean by that. There could be two lawyers who argue a case in the same exact way and get a different result. Am I wrong? I'm right. Okay, same words, same mannerisms. Actually, they're twins, and this is happening in two different parts of the world or two different parts of the country, and same exact thing is happening, and then the result comes back different. What you, my friend, have to be comfortable with is how you got there. So no matter what the outcome is, are you happy with the journey? The only way you can be happy with the journey is if the coordinates that you use to even try to get to the destination were in line with who you are. That's the brand consistency. Because while Quayne, and I'm not disagreeing, that detail orientation when you're a lawyer is critical. Hence, I'm not a lawyer. Right? So, but I had to learn that because there was a time, now put that into being a financial analyst, where I am manipulating thousands of numbers. Before I became a commercial real estate broker, I was responsible for a $35 million budget where I had to forecast what all the brokers were gonna do and what expenses were. I had headaches and stomach ache. I'm surprised I don't have 8 ulcers. Because what it takes for me to focus on minute details is extensive. But people kept saying, this is an area you have to develop in. This is an area, and so I spent so much time trying to develop something that is just not going to happen. I had a woman come in to try to help me organize the expenses, and she made all these nice little envelopes. It's okay, we come back from a business trip, you label this envelope, San Francisco business trip, this conference, and you put your expense receipts in there. She said it was so pretty, and I'm like, ready to go. As soon as I get back, I'm going to file these expenses right in this envelope. Did that happen? Okay. So when she came back for a checkup, she's like, right, I'm sorry, that was wrong. What I'm going to do is, and she literally cut out a shoebox, and she's like, I just want you to dump all your receipts in here. I'm like, that I can do, right? Because the detail, like, I can figure out someone else who's going to do that. Now, if I was going in the financial analyst role up to CFO, maybe there's a level of detail I have to do for a time until I move to the part where I'm more visionary. That's where we need to be more long-term in our thinking. So I'm not suggesting that you never compromise your values to get where you're going, but you have to be comfortable that if you never arrive at your destination, you're not going to regret the compromise. Because remember, the compromises are what derail us and take us into areas and make us become and behave in ways that are not consistent with the brand that we want. Questions? comments?
Doing a great job.
Thank you. I have a lot to cover, so I'm trying not to overwhelm you, but, all right, so we've talked about the insides, right? And now we're gonna talk about the elements of your brand, because while all of this value and sensation and things like that are going on, there still are things about you that people are checking for when they're making decisions, right? I am not oblivious to that. But what I want you to do is identify your core values so that as you're showing up in these areas that we're about to talk about, that you're showing up authentically. For instance. All right, so we'll talk about aura first. Would you agree that she has 3 different types of aura? If you saw this girl, would you think the same as when you saw that girl? When you saw this girl, would you think the same as if you saw that girl? Right? She feels different. The thing she's giving off is different. Because we haven't heard her say anything, correct? It's just a feeling that you get based upon how she's showing up. The name of my company used to be Evidently Assured, because I used to think I saw Michael Jordan actually walk into a room one day, and everybody looks, of course, because it's Michael Jordan. But then not too long, I went to another event, and people were turning and dumping, but this was somebody that nobody knew. And I was just like, there's something about that person. Have you ever seen a person who does not have a name, but you're like, they feel like somebody, right? There's a presence, there's an aura, there's a thing that they're giving off. And so you want to be aware of what your presence is like when you walk into a room. You know, if I had walked into this room and, came up and was like, good evening, how are you guys doing tonight? I'm gonna just talk a little bit about branding tonight, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. There's nothing I'm giving off that would make you want to listen. The room might be half empty right now. Well, Kwame might hold you accountable for that, so maybe you would stay, but it wouldn't be because you wanted to listen to me. So your aura, be aware of it. And feedback, which we're going to talk about the end, but get feedback. Because personal branding, your personal brand is one of those things that other people talk about to everybody except you. They discuss it with other people. Sometimes it's in the room before you get there. It most certainly is still there once you leave the room. And so you want to know how people are perceiving you. And it's not always going to be things that you want to hear. But be open to the feedback, because guess what? It's the only way we can develop. Period. End of story. All right. The next thing about your brand are your aesthetics, or the physical appearance, not just of you, but your workspace, your written and electronic communication, your work product. How are you representing your brand in the things that you're delivering physically to the world? It's a question, and do you know it? Now, I'm going to stay away from what you should and what you shouldn't do, again, because I'd like you to go back and think, for a lot of reasons. Shoulds and shouldn'ts are tough because that suggests that it applies to everybody in this room, which it doesn't. It can't. You have to know yourself to be able to apply these things and to be able to live authentically in each of these areas, so that even if you have your brands, your values intact, and you are showing up in the best way you know how in each of the areas we're going to talk about, and somebody gives you the label of confident, but they don't give you the label of smart, well, who cares? And I say that because not that you don't want to be perceived as smart, but that because you're going to find a place where your values are there, and that label will come. Because all labels don't come in all circumstances. Does that make sense? When you get to a place where you're connected, where people and the organization value your values, then you will start to get all of the recognition and the labels that you want, because it is of value. I remember taking on a client who, this was in the beginning when I first quit my corporate job and started this company, and I had to convince him to hire me. Now, I know better now, but I was just like, if you have to beg somebody to see the value in what you offer, there is never enough that you can do. That then it's time to walk away. And so now if the person's not seeking me out, or if I don't have a general conversation, oh, well, I'm interested in that, I'm not trying to make you see the value in what I do, because it's just not it's not where you are. It's not something that you value, and that's okay. So be mindful of your aesthetics. And the thing I'm gonna say a little bit more about that is around appropriateness. Now, that is something I will say is that organizations have standards for a reason, right? It's because they believe that their clients, their clientele will appreciate those standards. Standards are not an affront to your individuality, right? That's like moving into a neighborhood with a homeowners association. Everybody has agreed that they want the doors to be navy blue and that they want all the hardware to be chrome, right? So for you to come in and then put like a fuchsia handle on your front door is rude, right? If you want a place where they do fuchsia doorknobs, then you should move to a community where that is welcome, where the standards don't suggest something else. So if you're going to an organization, and I remember when I first started working in commercial real estate, they were telling me that, we dress conservatively around here. You don't really see any red, and they were really telling me kind of what the standards are. Now, I don't even think that's legal to say that, but they were basically giving me a hint, and I appreciate that. Because what happens is sometimes people are trying so hard to exert their individuality, and I'm going to show you who I am, that you detract from the work that you're doing. Right? And your appearance really is to neutralize the situation so you can be heard. Even if you dress to the nines every day, you have on the baddest shoes, the baddest suit, everything is just always top notch. Sometimes that can even be distracting. I'm not suggesting that you change it. I'm just saying take a look at it. What is your purpose and what is your point? How do you get to your purpose and your point without compromising your values? They can both exist at the same time somewhere. Assets, and Quayne talked about this. Your skills, capabilities, your communication. I remember I grew up in Philadelphia and I used to drop G's a lot. So I say good morning, right? And my mother, it would send her over the top. Now there's a value in there for her. She was also a teacher for 40 years. And so she's like, you're a really good public speaker, kiddo, but this like diction and not pronouncing the words is just, and she had me watch some people. And I was just like, right, I don't sound like that. So she had me watch me and she had me watch them. So I literally, when we used to have cassette tapes, yes, I put one in which was about diction. And so it literally had me talking like this, all the way from Philadelphia to Boston. I was pronouncing every word, even when I went to the rest station. People thought I was crazy. I answered the phone this way. But over time, it just became natural so that I could speak more quickly and still not compromise the way that I was communicating. If you start to change the way you speak, it is not an affront to who you are. That is not a value conversation. That is an environment conversation. It's distracting. I've been there. It's true. And now I evaluate people sometimes in public speaking. And it's always nice when someone asks for your feedback, because then you can say it and feel confident. But it's when you have somebody and you're like, oh, it could be so great. They just need to, right? And so you have to decide whether or not you want to say it. But communication is critical. Understanding the words that you use, the diction, when you're typing, social media, all of that is under the communication realm. Quayne talked about social media. It is a big deal because screenshots, I don't even care how much your privacy setting is. You just never know when these little ugly things will rear their heads. Does anybody know how much of face-to-face communication is based upon body language, words, and tone? How much do you think is, yes?
I think I heard it was like 85%, 90, like way up there.
60 body language, 40 like language, voice.
Or words?
Yes.
Yes, very close. So it's 58% is body language. 38%, am I getting these numbers right? Hold on. 58%, then 35%. What's left? Is that 7-ish? All right, anyway. It's about 60%, 40%, and then, no, 60. They're like, wait, she said she was good in math. So it's 60% is body language, around 30% is tone, and then only about 10%, but it's 7%, are the words that you choose. And I remember doing this fun exercise with a gentleman named Stephen, I can't call his last name, but he was talking about microaggressions and kind of how people say things. And he gave us this saying, and he said, I didn't say she stole the book. And I was like, all right. So he said, I'm going to change the focus on each word as I go through, and you tell me what I mean when I say it. So I'll try it with you. So if I said, I didn't say she stole the book, what do I mean? Somebody said she stole the book, right? I didn't say she stole the book, right? I didn't say she stole the book. I'm still calling her a thief though, right? Yes. And so it's those minor things, particularly when you're in meetings or you're talking to somebody where there's a value confrontation. These are those little things that shut communication down and abort processes and take you out of the way of actually accomplishing your goal. Intellectual capital, which lawyers know a lot about, confidence, and some people say, about confidence, fake it till you make it. Particularly in environments that you're just really uncomfortable with, right? Wherever you grew up or whatever your path was, you may end up in an arena that you know absolutely nothing about. You don't know the unwritten rules. You don't know how the game is played. Well, confidence can show up in how you ask questions, so that you're not necessarily trying to join the conversation as much as you are asking questions to learn more about the conversation and what people care about. Because that also gives you an indication of if your value system is going to match this particular arena, if this is a place where you need to be. So don't be afraid to not know things. Have the confidence just in who you are, particularly if you're solid in your values. Because you'll walk differently once you understand and you're grounded in your personal protocol. And then lastly, experience, which is also a big deal. Advertising and promotion, and women struggle with this more than most, is how are you getting your ideas, concepts, and information across? How are you using your connections to let people know what you're good at, what you did a good job on, without sounding like you're bragging? Well, the thing is depending on who you're talking to is how they're going to label it, right? You might say to someone, I finished that report in 6 months, or I passed the bar on the first try, or whatever means a lot to you. And one person might go, bragging again. The other person might say, Pat, that's fantastic, right? So don't be afraid to advertise, but it's not just a self-promotion game. It really is trying to get to an endpoint. What is it about me that needs to be out in the marketplace? And how am I getting it out there? And who's carrying that brand? It's okay to let people know what you're up to and what you're good at. It's even better when other people are doing it for you. All right, we're getting there. I want to leave time for questions. Associations. You know, there's that saying that it's not about what you know, but, and I like to say that it's about who you know, and it's about who knows you and how they know you, right? I know a lot of people, but I don't know if everybody, if I could count on every one of those people knowing me in the way that I need them to know me to get the contracts or the connections that I'm looking for. So one person, Quamey, might know me from slamming the door on him at the mall, right? That's how he might know me. Someone else might know me from being short on the airplane. I didn't really do that, I'm just making this up. But somebody might know me from doing a great job on the last contract. Somebody might know me for not being detail oriented. And you know what? I got to a point where I'm comfortable with that, because the gift that I bring is around listening and strategy and vision setting. And I have people to help me with the details. But if you need something from me that is incredibly detail-oriented, we need to talk about if I have a workaround, or I'm probably not the particular person for you. And that's okay. All right. Reputation management. So these networks help you manage your reputation, because the more people who know you based upon your value system, the more congruency that you have in the different areas. These people can be brand builders, and building your network, as Quayne said, is so critical. If you're a shy person, try to do a lot of one-on-ones. You don't have to go and work a room all the time and, introduce yourself to everybody and just, be the butterfly in the room. But you can plant yourself in a place where you know lots of people are gonna walk by. You can stand near the bar where you know people will come, right? And you can introduce yourself that way. One of the things that I'm about to write about is how to conference. A lot of people go to conferences and they look at the titles and they look at the content and they say, oh, I'm going to this conference because I want to hear, FLOTUS speak about blah, blah, blah. But you didn't check to see who else is going to be at the conference that you might want to meet. What kinds of questions are you going to ask? What are you saying that you offer? So there's actually a thing about conferencing in order for you to really get the best out of it or the most out of it. And most of that is understanding your value system. Because when you conference, you're going to hear a lot of you shoulds and this is, and if you're not doing this, you better start. And so sometimes you jump right in because this person was so successful in your mind that you think you need to adapt or adopt the way they do things to your path, and that's how we end up lost. And then you beat yourself up for not being able to follow that path, right? Because they were so successful, why couldn't I do it? Because that's not your personal protocol. That's not how you would normally make decisions. All right. Managing perception. Why is it important? So I just learned about law review. I didn't know about that, right? That's a big deal, right? Is it still a big deal? People want to make law review. All right. So that whole posting on blogs and writing about things, right, and networking and letting people know the content of your character, right? Now, particularly for folks of color, because we're in an interesting time in our country, obviously you walk in the door and people see what color we are, and they may have their own perceptions, but keep moving. You may even feel it, right? But the more you display your values and make connections, particularly if it ends up being a person who thought they summed you up, and it ends up that you guys actually share the same values. I can't tell you, how many times that happened to me in commercial real estate, which is 95% white males. I grew up in Philadelphia. Commercial real estate is a very networked industry. You won't see a job for a commercial real estate broker in the newspaper, because that's not how they hire people. They hire who they know. And so if you're not known in those particular circles, and a lot of times, commercial real estate is kind of like the NFL, where at the top, there's just no folks of color, so they don't have the exposure either. It's not necessarily that they're keeping us out. It's that a lot of us didn't have conversations about owning buildings when we were growing up, right? That's a new conversation. So we're not in those circles sometimes for people to even get to know us. So insert yourself and be comfortable with getting to know the players in these various things, even if you feel like a fish out of water. Because at the end of the day, we're all human and we're all looking for the same things. Affirmation, confirmation, authenticity, being able to roll around in this world in the fullness of who we are authentically. Internships, again, a reason why building your brand, understanding those values and having congruency is important. Careers, and that's because you don't want to abort a career because the values weren't right. I can't stress that enough. How many people I have coached and counseled who have called me and said, I want to make a career change. And I said, okay, what is it that you don't like about your current career? And the first thing they start talking about is the people on the job. I was like, well, that's not about your career. I need you to talk about your career. And we quickly get to, it's not the career. They actually love the work. They just don't like the environment. And you don't always have to leave to create a new environment. There are sometimes ways that you can get around that. And some of that really is just seeking first to understand before seeking to be understood. Sitting on boards, getting published, and then just making a name for yourself. Now, the interesting thing is, I also know a lot of lawyers who aren't lawyers anymore, right? So that's another reason why you have to have your value system in tow. Because if you adopt the values of where you are, then it's hard to then build the consistency into where you want to go, because it's not just other lawyers who know you. There's now clients and board members and people that you've met along the way, and you want them to be able to speak authentically and surely about who you are. Some of my final thoughts are, one, identify your values, and how you do that is look at those pet peeves. It I don't think it's up yet. If you want it, you can email me, but I have a list of about 300 values. And it can be a fun process that you can do with friends, but what you do is you go through all the values, you read each one, and you highlight or you mark all the things that just resonate with you, just right off the bat. And you might end up with 150. Then you take that 150 and you try to get down to 50. Then you take that 50 and you try to get down to 25. And then once you get down to 7, you're going to actually give some examples for yourself of why do I think that's a value. The reason why consideration is a value of mine, because these things set me off. So you kind of want to prove it out so that you know exactly that you've hit the value. Stay on your true path. Understand your sensations. Yes. Stay on your true path. And that's so critical because regret is a terrible feeling. It's just a terrible feeling. And I know, I'm all on the like, there's no regrets and everything happens kind of like it's supposed. But the reality is, if we knew that we were abandoning our own path to get on someone else's path, and then we end up regretting the journey we were on because we didn't get the outcome we wanted anyway, I suspect that we would have rather have been on our own path. Correct? Find an accountability partner. I'm huge. I have an accountability partner for this authentic living work I'm doing. I have an accountability partner for my finances. I have an accountability partner for one more thing. I can't call it. The big one is my values, right? Somebody who sees if I'm derailing or if I'm contracting with a client that does not match my values, they get to call me on it. I've given them permission to do that up front. And then don't do it for the outcome. I know it sounds crazy, but the goal is to do everything you can in the moment to get the outcome that you want. So I'm not suggesting that you let it go, that you don't care about it. What I'm saying is, at the end of the day, you really don't control it. But what you do control is the right here and the right now. And the decision that you make, is it going to be based upon by any means necessary to get the outcome? Because somebody said, if I do this, then I'll get that. Or are you going to do it in the way where you have the least amount of regret and you can enjoy the journey and be proud of it? The last thing I'm going to say, and I think this is just so important because we all are going to fall down. But failure is no indication of your ability to complete the task. It simply means that you need a new strategy. You just have to decide if what you want is worth the work to get there, or worth the time spent to adjust the strategy. You're gonna have brand faux pas, right? You're gonna have a day where everything went wrong and you like go ballistic on somebody, boom, brand buster, right? Now, studies have shown that it takes anywhere between 25 and 50 unique interactions with a brand to change your mind about that brand. This is how you know it's true. If you've ever had bad service at a restaurant, I don't care if they tore the restaurant down. It could be a cleaners right now. When you and your friend or your mother or your sister or somebody who's never visited your town, when you ride by that spot, what's the story you tell? Because that means you didn't, well, one, probably you didn't patronize that restaurant again. So they never got to make it up to you and you never forgot. Similar to the way Quaim said, it's easier to remember the bad interactions. So if you are making your choices, though, based on your value system, then you can't control other people's filters. So sometimes you're going to live by your values, and what you're going to realize is that you signed up for the wrong organization. So failure is not an indication of your ability. You just need to adjust your strategy. Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question about accountability in regards to your values. So I'm a little bit curious as far as, like you said before, you meet with the client, your values are not aligned, and you have a partner to, is it really, you say, like, keep you in check, or to, no, really?
So, yeah, so this person understands what I mean when I say I value consideration, I value creativity, I value variety / options. Like, I'm a person, and this is how I found this out. When I was in corporate America, I worked at a company, and I guess I could say this on tape now because I'm working for myself. But anyway, I was working corporate America, and I just said that I don't like being late. Now, this particular job, you had to be there at 8:30 every morning. You had to be, right? So there's no particular reason. Like, nothing was going to fall apart if I didn't show up at 8:30. So just how stringent they were around it, I really couldn't get to work before 8:40. I don't know what it was. I could get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. All the forces of nature would conspire against me. I swear it. I couldn't get to work on time. But I would stay late, no problem. It wasn't about work ethic. I had no problem blowing through lunch, right? So I work corporate America. I keep having these little whatever. So I move up the ranks. Then they don't care as much. But then I'm just like, what is it? Why can't you get here? So then I get into commercial real estate. And the managing director was like, you know what? In the interview, he's like, you know what, kiddo? I don't care when you come and I don't care when you go. Guess what time I got there today? Because it was the lack of options. It was saying, like, this is it. Now that I can identify it, I probably could have gotten around it, right? But if I am entering into a contract where it is so stringent, then my accountability partner just asked me a few questions to make sure that I know what I'm doing. Does that make sense? I have also signed one-on-one clients, notable personalities who had no compassion. And just their language, and when I'm telling the stories, my accountability partner is like, you're not going to be able to live with that. And one day it's going to come to you. So they're going to not show compassion when it comes to you. Are you willing to deal with that? Well, I signed the client anyway because I wanted the name. 3 months later, I couldn't do it anymore. So you have to know your accountability partner, and it takes a while for them to understand your rhythm of what that means. Because you know what will happen? What's your name?
Me? Oh, Prince.
Prince. You know what will happen is you will be vexed. So you might talk, your accountability partner is somebody you need to talk to regularly. So you might talk to your accountability partner and they notice that you don't seem as upbeat about your work anymore. You don't have that same pep in your step. And when they start pushing buttons, what comes out is a value confrontation. And so then they name it and they go, that's why that's happening, because, right?
Right.
That's what they're for. What else? Nothing?
Nominate me to ask a question. Yeah.
It's, yeah, wheels are turning.
Trying to figure out how to word it, but if I just say it.
Yeah, thank you.
I have an issue with a family member,
Mm-hmm.
very significant family member, who believes that all of my decisions should be market-based
Mm-hmm.
led.
Mhm.
I'm trying to find a way
Mhm.
to explain that to that, but just being here eats them up every day, because this was not what they deemed
Sure,
the market-based decision.
sure.
What is an effective way to, outside of, like I said earlier, bluntly responding to them
Yep,
and causing confrontations that are not value-based?
right.
What is an effective way to get them to understand?
So you just gave me comfort that you're gonna do number 3 of my objectives, is you're actually gonna apply this maybe to some of the ways that you got the language going. So a couple things on that is you can't change the filter of that person, right? And so I wrote a book that talks about these places I like to call Lam and Lot. And Lam is the land of make-believe, and Lot is the land of authenticity and truth. And in Lam, what matters is how it looks and perceptions and what you're supposed to do. And this is where the market-led brands live. And then there's Lot, which is what it is, and it's truth, and it's based upon congruency. And so the best I think that you can do is, 1, talk about how, when they do that, how it affects you. 2, that you're really comfortable with your journey. When I got married, I sent out letters to all of my family members that I thought might have opinions. And I basically said, this is a great day for us. We're gonna have a really good time. If I don't ask for your opinion, don't give it. So that when we get to the end of this, all relationships will be intact and it will just be all love. If you have anything that you don't like, you hate, like, talk about it amongst yourselves. But don't call me. So I think to some degree, you have to put people on notice when you're okay. And don't defend yourself, right? So when you really get to the place where you are so comfortable in your personal protocol and your values, you're gonna stop defending your position. So don't stop defending it because I'm saying it, but I mean, it won't be false. Somebody's gonna try to push a button and it won't go anywhere because you're so good with where you are and who you are and what your personal protocol. I was about to say how you get down, but that's on video. I just said it anyway. That's right. So I think that just explaining to them where you are and the effects of it, and if they don't get it, like, then you have to figure out, like, I've had to turn the volume from 10 on some relationships down to 6, and from 6 down to 0, and maybe some got turned from 3 to 10 because I realized how connected we were. So you have to figure out what the volume of that relationship should be. What else? Was this helpful? Can you?